finally, Scott is deeply committed to real change in Madison. Please join me in welcoming our candidate for governor, Scott Walker.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. What a great crowd. It is an honor to be here tonight. I first want to thank Mike Grebe, not only for that introduction, but for your leadership here in this community, across the state, and really across this country. It's my honor to not only be introduced by Mike Grebe, but to tell you all that Mike Grebe has once again taken on the task of leadership and is going to be chairing our campaign for governor here in the state of Wisconsin. Mike, you're a great business and civic leader here in this community. You're a great political leader in this state and across this country, and I'm honored to have you on my team. You know, we're exceptionally honored to have our guest speaker and really the team of both Speaker and Mrs. Gingrich here tonight. I'm going to do an introduction in a minute, but I want to acknowledge you both and thank you so much for being here. I know in a way, particularly Mrs. Gingrich, it's like coming home, except on the other shore of the state. Growing up in Whitehall, we were just up in Trimble County the other day on our Harleys, and we're always glad to have you back in Wisconsin. Come back often. You may have heard that we had a little bit of a challenge fitting you all in the Wisconsin Club, so we came here tonight, and who would have known, we're at capacity inside the Hilton. I think that's a combination of two things. One, we have a tremendous guest speaker here tonight, and I was thrilled to be with him just a little bit earlier. He has done a tremendous job in the past in our United States Congress. He has done an even more amazing job of getting that message out since then. We are pleased to have Speaker Newt Gingrich with us here this evening. But I also think something amazing is happening in this state, as Mike alluded to. Whether it was in Fond du Lac yesterday afternoon, in Fond du Lac County up in Ripon, whether it was the night before in Washington County in West Bend, whether it's been from one end of the state to the other, we have seen record crowds of people coming out. And the most exciting thing is that nearly every one of them, people have told us, half or more of those crowds are people who've never, ever, ever been involved in a political campaign before. People understand whether it's Washington or Madison, it's time to get off the sidelines and get into the game. Today is a good example of that because Wisconsin faces some tremendous challenges, and they were just reinforced by what this governor and his allies in Madison accomplished today. You know, at a time when we just found out a few weeks ago that Wisconsin lost 133,800 private sector jobs in the last year, that jobless number is remarkable because 2 months ago, we had the highest number we had since 1982. A month ago, we had the highest number we had since 1958, and sadly, those 133,800 jobs we lost are the largest number of jobs we've lost in a 12-month period ever in Wisconsin. We have a nearly 10% unemployment rate, and in places like Janesville, Sheboygan, or Racine, we have a much higher rate than just that. At the same time, we face incredible challenges in state government. This government faces a $6.6 billion, not million, billion-dollar budget deficit, the fourth largest in the country. Now, anybody who knows anything about math or geography knows that Wisconsin is not the fourth largest state. We certainly don't have the fourth largest economy. We have the fourth largest budget deficit because this governor and his allies in Madison have deferred tough decisions time and time again. In fact, I'll give you a good example. Last June 30th, almost a year ago to the date, any accountants in the room? Because if you measure our budget deficit according to GAAP standards, generally accepted accounting principles, We had the largest gap deficit in state history, and you measure it per capita, the largest in the entire country. Not Illinois, not California, not New York State. Wisconsin had the largest gap deficit in the country. And that's because this governor and his allies have deferred tough decisions. They've taken school aid payments and pushed them off to the next biennium. They raided the patient compensation fund, which makes it harder to attract good physicians in rural and impoverished parts of our state. Any of you who've been riding the roads like I did last week on Harley know that there are potholes all across the state with Jim Doyle's name on it because he's taken nearly $1.5 billion out of the segregated transportation fund. And by raiding all these things and by deferring all these things into the future, when the economy fell apart last fall, we were in the worst possible position. That's why we have a $6.6 billion budget deficit. And what did he do to resolve it? Well, he and his allies in Madison decided, let's not be more efficient. Let's not find new solutions to operating government. Instead, he first raided the so-called stimulus package and took money from President Obama and put it into balance his budget, but that wasn't enough. When he signed the budget today, if you take what was passed and what was combined, which was what passed back in February together, in total, taxes and fees in Wisconsin will go up by more than $3 billion because of these actions. Now, I've got a pretty friendly crowd here tonight, but I would defy you to go to any crowd, Republican or Democrat, go to a Rotary Club, go to a Chamber of Commerce, heck, next Sunday, go to a church potluck, and ask anybody in the state of Wisconsin, do you believe at the time when unemployment is nearly 10%, when we lost 133,000 jobs in this state, do you believe that raising taxes, $3 billion is the answer? What do you think the people would say? No. In fact, I think the only people left in this state who might think that raising taxes is the right answer might be the handful of people who work in the governor's cabinet. Certainly wouldn't be the president's cabinet because they don't pay taxes, but that's a whole nother matter. But other than those handful, I don't think anybody, regardless of party, believes that that's the right thing to do, and yet that's what they're calling us to do here in Wisconsin. Well, I can remember a similar circumstance to what we face here today. Back in the early 1980s, I wasn't growing up here in Wauwatosa where I live. I grew up a little bit closer to the state line in Walworth County in a small town called Delavan. In the early 1980s, we remember, it seems like it was just yesterday, but excuse me, it was almost 30 years ago when this country had a national recession. Here in Wisconsin, we had a huge budget deficit, and we had one party in control. Tony Earl was the governor, and his party was in control of the Assembly and the Senate. And you remember what they did to balance their budget? They raised taxes. In fact, it got so bad, I remember growing up in Walworth County, that so many jobs and so many businesses left the state of Wisconsin that then Governor Thompson, that would be Jim Thompson from Illinois, one of the few I might add who's not been indicted, but Jim Thompson put up a billboard on the state line. You remember what it said? When the last business leaves Wisconsin, please turn off the lights. It was that bad. Well, you look at this budget, and frankly, it could be a whole lot worse. It could be a whole lot worse. But thankfully, the rest of that story wasn't the end back in the 80s. A guy from Elroy, not too far down from Trempealeau County, a guy from Elroy by the name of Tommy Sampson said, we can do better than that. We live in Wisconsin. And he set out on a chart to chart a course to rebuild this state, to bring back reform and fiscal sanity. And he did that in the 80s and into the 1990s. And I believe that we can do it again here in Wisconsin. I am running for governor because I believe in Wisconsin. In the last several months since the beginning of the year, I've gone from Superior down to Kenosha, from Prairie du Chien up to Green Bay, from Wausau down to Janesville and everywhere in between. And what I have found is that the people of this state are still hardworking, decent people. The employers of this state many times are 2 or 3 generations old. They want to stay and grow here in Wisconsin. Our resources are some of the best in the world right here in Wisconsin. What is failing is not our people or our places. What is failing us is our state government. It is time to set aside the failed decisions of the past and move forward with an agenda that can rebuild this state, that can put Wisconsin back on the map as a reformer, a solution that's not about being a Republican or a Democrat. It's about knowing the difference between what's right and what's wrong and moving forward with real solutions. I'm running for governor on a simple agenda. I believe in economic opportunity. I believe in limited government, and I believe in personal freedom. Simply put, I believe in jobs, reform, and liberty. And I think the majority of the people in this state and this country do too. Sadly, the actions of those in charge in Madison seem to want to take away too much of those simple three principles: jobs, reform, and liberty. But we're going to continue to talk about it. You know, those are simple principles, but not often easy. There have been countless times in my tenure as the county executive here in Milwaukee County when it would have been politically more expedient to set aside those principles and instead go along with the flow. But you know, when I first ran for county executive, I made a solemn pledge to the people of this community, and that was that I would spend the taxpayers' money as if they were my own. I've kept that pledge, and if you elect me as your governor, I will do it time and time and time again until we get this state back to work. I know we can win, not just on Election Day. I know we can get this state moving again because I've seen it happen before. Nationally, in 1980, we had an optimist, a visionary in the name of Ronald Reagan, who took that same message to the American people, and even without a majority in the House of Representatives, moved forward an agenda that from 1983 through the end of the decade brought about the largest peacetime economic boom in American history. 21 million new jobs, 5 million new businesses. That put America back on the map. If we can do it in America, we can do it right here in Wisconsin. In 1986, Tommy Thompson defied the odds and took on Tony Earl in similar, if not identical, circumstances. And he took that same message of limited government, economic opportunity, and personal freedom to the people of this state. And he said, yes, we can. This is Wisconsin. We can put reform. We can put fiscal responsibility back on the map. He not only built this state up to the great state it is today and will be in the future, he made us a shining star across this country as a true reformer. If he could do it in the 80s and 90s, we can do it again in 2010 and beyond. And in 1992, when things looked bleak, when one party controlled everything in Washington, and we thought the absolute power that was in place was going to bring us down, instead, the people of this country, just like the people of the state and the people back right here in Milwaukee County did several years ago for county executive, but the people in this country said, we can do better. And the leader who stood up and helped put that all together was the man I'm honored to introduce tonight. The man who said, again, much as he has in his book, a book that, in fact, we had a great discussion of this about a year and a half ago, just on the other side of these bright lights, when the state party, Reince Priebus, who's here tonight, has done a great job for the party, brought Speaker Gingrich in, and we talked about real change, going from a society that fails to one that succeeds, that really works, and talked about the future of this country. Well, back in 1994, there was a visionary who was really the architect of the plan to say, again, it's not about a red state, it's not about a blue state, it's about a red, white, and blue agenda that gets this country going again. He was the man who had that vision. He was the man who continues to push that. The architect of the contract with America, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, someone who has been a great leader time and time again on the tough issues facing this country, someone who I'm proud to call a friend, and someone who's a great leader for this, not only this event here tonight, but a great leader for this country, an author, a teacher, a husband, a great family person, someone who is a good friend of Wisconsin. I'm honored to bring up the Speaker of the House of Representatives and a great American leader, Newt Gingrich.
All right. You know, it's 2008 was a bad year for Republicans. now, you know, that you've lost control, both houses, the governorship. What needs to be done for the Republican Party to become relevant again in Wisconsin?
Well, I think the first step, sadly, as a taxpayer and a citizen, has already been done. This budget is probably the worst budget we've ever seen. It's the largest job killer the state of Wisconsin's ever seen. And so much as when Tony Earl and his party were in control in the 80s, Tommy Thompson came in with a positive agenda, an alternative agenda, and that was enough for him to get elected and really help turn the state around. I think the same thing's going to happen in 2010. That people already are upset with the over $3 billion worth of new tax fees. They're upset with a lot of the other job killer provisions in there. For us, for me as a candidate for governor and for others who join with me in running for the legislature, it's going to take us charting out a clear course, a positive agenda for how we move the state forward. If we do that, I think we'll be successful.
Is there a sense that if the economy hasn't rebounded, there will be a sort of punishing factor? People will punish the Democrats for it?
Well, I think, you know, we talk about taxes, spending, healthcare, education, all those are things that get people worked up. But jobs are really the thing that keeps people up at night. And so I think people are going to assess over the next year and a half which candidates, which party, which platform really talks about things that will get people back to work again. And I think, again, that this budget, anybody who supported the budget, the governor all the way through, is really going to be in a pickle because much as we saw at the national level, when they talked about the stimulus package supposedly lowering the unemployment rate, we've seen just the opposite. Instead of going below 8%, it's now gone to 9.4 and probably even higher. I fear the same thing's going to happen here in Wisconsin.
Jobs are such a huge issue. Can you be a little more specific on what you would plan to
Sure.
do?
Well, across the board, we're going to look at tax cuts, everything from individual income taxes, corporate taxes, even eliminating the tax on retirement benefits here in the state of Wisconsin. All those are things that would keep wealth and jobs here in the state of Wisconsin. We got a great comparison. You know, on the other end of the country, down in Texas, Governor Perry years ago put a very aggressive, not only anti-tax, but an aggressive agenda to seek out businesses to put in place tort reform. And in 2008, in Texas, they created more jobs than in all the other 49 states combined. To me, that's a good example. If you're bold, if you don't just nibble around the edges, but you're aggressive in limiting the size and scope of government, and in turn putting some of those tax dollars back into the people and employers that make the state great, we in turn are going to see jobs come back to Wisconsin.
You know, there have been a lot of rumors recently that Doyle may not run. Do you believe you'll be running against Jim Doyle?
In the end, I'm not running against Jim Doyle. I'm running to make the state great again. So whether it's Jim Doyle on the ballot or anybody else, doesn't matter. We're going to take an agenda that allows people to believe in Wisconsin again, an agenda that's going to bring more jobs, more opportunity, and more freedom back to the state. And you know, certainly the governor would provide a great contrast. I would think probably the best contrast we've had in this state since 1986, when Tommy Thompson beat Tony Earl. But for us, it doesn't matter who the candidate is. Our focus is on November 2nd and making the state great again.
Who do you see as your biggest competition within the Republican Party to run for this job?
You know, I really don't. I don't focus on anything but November 2nd. In fact, actually, I focus a lot on November 3rd. I've talked to business after business from one end of the state to the other, and they're scared. A lot of employers have told me, particularly publicly traded companies, their board of directors are talking about encouraging them to look at moving out of the state. I tell them, wait till November 3rd. Give me a chance, give me an opportunity to show not only we can win, but that we can get the state moving in the right direction. And again, I'm not worried about any of their opponents. There could be 1 or 100. My focus is entirely on jobs.
Scott, what are you going to do to attract votes from African American and Latino voters in Wisconsin? And how might you bring them more into your own campaign?
Well, I think when I ran for re-election the first time, I picked up 42% of the vote in the African American community in Milwaukee because I didn't pander. I had a message that worked. I had a message that was consistent. I didn't pick one community or one neighborhood over another. I just went out and campaigned hard. I think it parallels what Tommy did. You know, Tommy had great numbers in all parts of the state of Wisconsin because he had a message that resonated and he wasn't afraid to go and campaign. So whether it's in the African American community, the Latino community, the Hmong community, or frankly, whether it's you know, all the way up in Superior and Wausau and other places that maybe historically have voted more Democrat, we're not going to concede any votes in the state of Wisconsin. We're going to campaign all out because we think we've got a message when it comes to jobs that people care about no matter where they're at.
Do you think a candidate from Milwaukee can win statewide?
Yeah, I think there's no doubt. I mean, you look at the combination of, I grew up in a small town and apply some of those same values, but more importantly, I've taken on the political machine here in Milwaukee not once, not twice, but 3 times. And I think the voters from Superior all the way down here to Milwaukee and everyone in between look at that and say, who do you want in Madison to take on the machine but a guy who's taken on probably the most powerful machine in the state, and that's me. And we do it because we put our faith in the people. I mean, that's the other big contrast. Now, you asked before about the governor. Why I think that's such a stark contrast is the governor, with all due respect, we're gonna run a positive campaign and just draw out the contrast, but Governor Doyle puts his faith in the government. I put my faith in the people, and I think that's going to be the contrast here. And the more people see that we're fighting for them, no matter where they live in the state, no matter what they look like, where they come from, what their economic background, there'll never be a time when this governor can't look someone in the eye and say, I've done everything possible to keep your job and to grow jobs in the state. That's a message I think resonates. With that, Speaker?